Okay, this is a review of adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. And then in my final example, I'm going to do a subtraction of fractions where borrowing is involved because a lot of us have trouble with borrowing. So here are the steps. Find a common denominator, rename all of the fractions, add the numerators, keep the denominators, and the fifth thing you can always do is to check to see if you can simplify or reduce. Okay, so I've colored step 1 blue so that you can find it. And you'll notice over here the denominators are 8 and 2. So I'm going to put them into what I call a hockey stick. And this hockey stick is useful for many things all the way through high school math when you start working with a lot of variables. So in the hockey stick, what I want to do is divide out what these two numbers have in common. So if you know the greatest common factor, that's a good thing to always use because it cuts your steps down. But if you don't know the greatest common factor, you can just start with your primes. And as a reminder, primes, only one in itself goes into it. So 2, 3, 5, 7, not 9, 11, 13, etc. So you can always start with this list here. I know that 2 goes into 8 and 2. And then what I'm going to do is divide that 2 into the 8 and put the 4 right below. Divide the 2 into the 2, put the 1 right below. And your LCD is the three numbers on the outside multiplied together. So 2 times 4 times 1 equals 8. So your LCD is 8. Now we're going to go on to step 2. Step 2 I've colored pink so you can find it over here when we are done doing the math. But the first thing I want to do is rewrite my problem so that it's not horizontal but vertical. And I'm going to do something I call times lines equal signs. Times lines equal signs. And this is where I'm going to change my fractions accordingly. I know that I want 8s on the bottom. And so I just look across and I say 2 times what equals 8? Well, that's 4. And then I have to put a 4 on the top because 4 over 4 is 1, and we can multiply anything by 1 and make it look different without changing the value. Next, I'm going to look at my 8. 8 times what equals 8? And that is 1 as well. And then we multiply fractions straight across, which gives me a 4 on the top. Straight across gives me a 7 on the top. Step 3, I've colored green. That says we're going to add the numerators. The numerators are the top, so 4 plus 7 is 11. Step 4 says keep the denominator. I'm going to color that purple. Our denominator is 8, so we're going to keep the 8. And we're not done here because we need to remember that we have this 1 over here. So I'm going to bring that 1 down. And then we're going to look at this step 5 with the simplify. I noticed that 11 is bigger than 8, which means this is an improper fraction. So we need to now go from an improper fraction to a proper fraction. So if I'm taking 11 over 8 into a proper mixed fraction, mixed number, I simply say how many 8s are in 11. I know there's 1, 8, and 11. How many are left over? 3, and it goes back over the 8. So now we have our mixed number, and we can add this mixed number to the one we had over here. So we end up with 2 and 3/8 as our final answer. I wrote the word primes down here in case you come back and look at the video later. We used that with your common denominator, finding the LCD. Now we're going to look at subtracting fractions with unlike denominators, and we'll color our steps again. So find a common denominator, rename all of the fractions, subtract the numerators, keep the denominator, and our fifth step was to simplify. So let's get started by finding a common denominator. And usually when we're working with problems that we're learning how to do a bunch of different things, some of you can already tell what the common denominator is going to be, but for those of you that don't, we're going to go ahead and do that. If you already know, you can skip forward. Okay, so I've colored step 1 blue. I have gone down here in the blue box to find my common denominator. I put my denominators in the hockey stick. The only thing they have in common is a 1. 1 goes into 4 and I get 4. 1 goes into 3 and I get 3. So your LCD is 1 times 4 times 3, which is 12. Now let's move on to step 2. Okay, so when we're renaming the fractions, which is my pink step, I'm gonna do times lines, equal signs. The denominator I want is 12. Sorry, there's construction going on. So with 12s on the bottom, I look across and say 4 times what equals 12. That's 3, so I need a 3 on the top and bottom. 3 times what equals 12? That would be 4. So a 4 on the top and a 4 on the bottom. We multiply fractions straight across, so that's 9. Straight across, so that's 8. Step 3 says subtract the numerators. 9 minus 8 is 1. And step 4, keep the denominator. And my denominator is 12. Step 5 is simplify, and 1 over 12 cannot be simplified, so we're just going to keep our 1 over 12. And that was subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. Okay, the final thing we need to talk about is subtracting fractions with unlike denominators and then needing to borrow. So I've rewritten my problem vertically. Now I need to find my LCD. What divides out of 2 and 8? A common factor is 2. 2 goes into 8 4 times. 2 goes into 2 once. My LCD is these numbers multiplied together. So 2 times 4 times 1 equals 8. So we want 8s on the bottom. I've set up my space to write equivalent fractions. Now I'm going to figure out what to multiply by. 8 times 1 is 8, and 2 times 4 is 8. And then we multiply our fractions straight across, giving us a 3 and a 4. The next step is to subtract the numerators, but 3 is less than 4, so we need to borrow just like in regular math. And so I need to borrow a whole, so that's 3 becomes a 2, but a whole over here, we need it to be a fraction with that matching denominator. So our new fraction after we borrowed is 11 over 8. And now we can subtract our numerators. 11 minus 4 is 7, keeping the denominator, and then don't forget about your whole numbers. 2 minus 1 is 1. So your final answer is 1 7/8. Sorry about all of the construction. See you next time.